This week on Forward.
There was this music scene in Seattle. That's where we came out of. Like, we just didn't do it by ourselves. There were clubs. There were Sub Pop was a record label. There were radio stations, college radio that were playing us, and local magazines and local media that were promoting us. So, like, we certainly didn't do it by ourselves. There needs to be a new era in American politics, and it just boils down to the voting system. And people will criticize ranked choice voting that the counting is complicated, but it's not.
It is my pleasure to welcome to the podcast rock legend, co-founder of Nirvana, and national board member of the Forward Party, the chair of the Forward Party of Washington State, Krist Novoselic. Welcome, Krist.
Thank you, Andrew. Thanks for having me on your podcast. I'm glad to be here.
So I grew up listening to your music. How the heck does one start Nirvana with Kurt Cobain and David Grohl? How the hell did I forget David Grohl's first name? He's the Foo Fighters founder, I guess. But yeah, like, how the heck did you hook up with those two guys? And you must have been like late teens, early 20s at that time?
Late teens, early 20s, yeah. Because 1985, 1984. And we lived in this town on the Washington coast, Aberdeen. We had a hunger for new music, independent music, punk rock music, the music on the television and the radio and the magazines. Mainstream magazines weren't speaking to us. So we just met like-minded other young people and people with shared needs and values. And there was a system, a scene, a music scene already, with people just making their own way and not relying on the corporate narrative of what good music is or what popular music is. And we made our own way, and we made our own shows. We made our own music. We made our own fanzines, our own records, cassettes. It was completely independent.
So when you were a high school student, were you already rocking out? And when you met Kurt and Dave, was it like, okay, the three of us are going to form a band? Or is it a situation where you guys are all performing in multiple bands? Because I have friends who are musicians, and a lot of them were parts of lots of bands.
I was already rocking out when I was like 3 or 4 years old in my father's workshop, and he was playing all kinds of tapes or listening to the radio. And this was like 1970, 1969. So I grew up listening to rock music my whole life, and I loved it. And I still listen to a lot of rock music and play rock music. Nirvana was the first band I was ever in, and same with Kurt Cobain. And we started Nirvana in about late 86, early 1987. And we had a series of drummers before Dave joined. Dave joined in 1990. And
wow.
So yeah, I mean, we just loved to play music, and Kurt Cobain was very artistic and expressive. He was always drawing, painting, making music, writing songs. He wasn't interested in like playing cover music, or he had ideas of what he wanted to do musically. And he had this it was a natural gift. He was a true artist, and he was expressive like that. And then something about the way that he could do his vocals and play his guitar and the imagery that he would write connects with a lot of people, even to new generations to this day. That's how.
Dude, I see a Nirvana t-shirt on the street just about every single day. So you've definitely touched multiple generations. So you guys are rocking out as young people in the late 80s. Dave Grohl joins the band in 1990. And then I think it was 91 that Smells Like Teen Spirit is on my TV screen on MTV.
Yes.
How did you guys get on or what was it like when you shot that first video? How did you guys get signed? Any of that jazz?
Well, the so-called alternative music or the new wave of music was coming around in the late 80s. And there was a time when there was no rock record in the top 10. And so there needed to be a reinvention of music, which rock and roll music tended to do. And then in the early 90s, Nirvana, we were in the right place in the right time. And so um, I just want to put this forward. So I'm not, I just want to be sensitive on how I say this, but like there were bands that led the way for us, like Faith No More and Jane's Addiction, and they were on FM radio, and they showed that there was a new kind of rock music coming. And so Nirvana in 1991, we had recorded Nevermind, and it was our second record. We released the record, and it just went viral, and that was before the internet. And so it was on the radio. It got added on radio stations all over the country. And our video for Smells Like Teen Spirit was on heavy rotation on MTV. So there you had it. We just kind of hit it. And then with that, that opened the floodgates for a new sensibility, a new kind of music where rock and roll reinvented itself. It was the grunge scene. There were great bands in Seattle. So when we first started speaking about like young people with shared needs and values in Aberdeen, Olympia, Tacoma, Seattle. Then we would go on tours and connect with people all around the country, these little scenes. There was this music scene in Seattle, and that's where we came out of. Like, we just didn't do it by ourselves. There were clubs. There were Sub Pop was a record label. There were radio stations, college radio that were playing us, and local magazines and local media that were promoting us. So like, we certainly didn't do it by ourselves. We came out of this community.
Well, Krist, you should know I was a fan. I went to the first few Lollapaloozas. The first one had Jane's Addiction, so that was the Perry Farrell era. So I remember them well. I remember Faith No More. I remember Smells Like Teen Spirit hitting, and it hit like a hammer. Where the song and the video were everywhere. You guys ended up giving rise to grunge. When you talk about the Seattle bands, I think about you. I think of Pearl Jam. I think of Soundgarden. Alice in Chains was Seattle too, right? I mean, like I was a fan of all those.
Absolutely, Alice in Chains. Yeah.
Yeah. So you have a kind of rocket ship ride as a literal rock star that most of us can only imagine. What is your recollection of that time? Because you must have gone from just playing local clubs to all of a sudden it's everywhere you go. People are, I mean, I'm not sure. Kurt probably would just get recognized on the street anywhere you went. Though you're a towering figure in your own right. I mean, you're like 6'5", so you're hard to miss if people know what they're looking for. But what was that ride like?
From 1991 to 1994, and I look back at that period, it just seemed like it was like 10 years and not like 3.5 years, whatever it was. So it was intense. There was a lot going on. And from just being a person, I always lived independently. Like, I never had a credit card. I would buy used cars and fix them up and keep them going myself. I would buy clothes at the Goodwill, and I was always trying to be a resourceful person. And I never watched television. I never got in. I was just not interested in mainstream things. I would work. I was an industrial painter, and I painted like factories, aircraft factories, paper mills, sawmills, aluminum factories. That was my job. And then I quit to be like a bohemian lifestyle. And then all of a sudden, like, I could afford to buy a house in Seattle. And then I can afford a new car, so it was way different. And then I was just, I would get recognized, and I still do. Like, I was out last night, I was in Seattle, and I had to stop for the selfies. I was in this restaurant, and so I'm glad to do it. I mean, that
Yeah, you're a good dude that way. I mean,
people
I see
didn't
it.
care, right? So I'm very grateful that people care.
I have to say, when Kurt passed, it was shocking. It was an earthquake. I mean, and that was true for people like me who didn't know him. Like he felt like the voice of a generation who passed way too soon.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people deal with that. Um, there, there are people who are watching this podcast who know what I'm talking about, to just be a suicide survivor, and it's not somebody who tried to kill themselves and survive, but the family, the loved one, the people who deal with losing somebody like that, and it's really hard. It's something that's so, and only people who deal with that. I don't know. I shouldn't even say that, but it's just hard to deal with. So there's people out there watching who know what I'm talking about. So it's really hard to explain. It's like it's a whole issue in itself.
Hey YouTube, thanks for watching. Please do hit like and subscribe, and hit that bell if you want to be notified every time a new episode drops. Probably on Mondays, but hit that bell, and thank you.
Nirvana ended in 1994. Kurt died, and so Dave went on to do Foo Fighters, and I got involved in Seattle politics. So that's how I got in. Like, my road led to the Forward Party here in 2024, and there was the teen dance ordinance in Seattle where there couldn't be any all ages shows. If you were an adult between the ages of 18 and 21, you couldn't go to those small scale shows to see like these bands that are.
It was like real life Footloose.
It was like Footloose, yeah. So I started to get involved with that and advocate for more inclusive music industry. The Washington legislature, there was a harmful to minors bill. It was initially called the Erotic Music Law, and that was censorship. And basically, they were promoting an adult section of like the record store or adult record stores, because if the music was deemed harmful to minors, then it had that stigma of like pornography. So we fought that, and along the way, I got my civic education, and I learned about how the system works. I'm just a bill. I'm only a bill. There's that cartoon.
Sure, Schoolhouse Rock, man. We all know, at least people of our generation know it.
That's the level where I came in. And I also learned about like the election systems and like the reality of elections. And so like we'd have some really bad opponents in the legislature who would want to censor the music community. And so I would naively say like, well, we should run somebody against them. And they'd be like, oh no, Chris, they're in a safe seat district. They win they don't even have an opponent. And I'm like, well, why is that? And I would go online, and I used the Alta Vista search engine. That's where I was. And this was like 1995, 1996. And I would key in search terms like election reform, voting in elections. And I discovered I'd just get one group. And there was this group called the Center for Voting and Democracy, which went on to be Fair Vote. So, and then what are these ideas? Like, it was called instant runoff voting, which we call ranked choice voting now, and proportional representation. Like, we can do this in America.
You were so ahead of the curve, Krist, on ranked choice voting. You became the chair of Fair Vote, which is an awesome organization doing great work to this day. I do want to return to this period, 91 to 94, for just a minute, because I'm burning up with curiosity. So 91, you guys become everywhere. I remember you guys doing MTV Unplugged, Saturday Night Live. What were you guys doing? Arenas or massive crowds during that time?
Absolutely,
clubs.
We were the biggest band in the world.
Yeah.
We would play.
I mean, that must have been.
You could go to a Nirvana show, and we would do these tours, and we would play like arenas, and then you could go to a Nirvana show for like $25 ticket, $30 ticket. These were working family prices, because this is where we came from. And of course, we were selling CDs, so we could, you could make money doing that stuff.
So, what was the biggest crowd you guys played, and do you remember thinking anything when you guys walked on
Oh
that stage or
wow,
off?
that I think it's like 350,000 people in Brazil. But if I ever write an autobiography, it's like, oh, the the unauthorized autobiography. I wasn't thinking by Krist Novoselic, like. So like I could go back. Uh it was a great ride. I miss Kurt. I wish, I could just say so much about that. And Dave, I just got a text from Dave today. So, Dave's doing great, and he's carrying the flag of rock and roll. He's rocking the world. The Foo Fighters are great. I love their new album. And they're out there doing their thing. And Dave is generous enough to invite me out on some of his things occasionally. And I always accept. So I'm very, very grateful for that.
Hey all, if you know me, you know I'm not that handy in the kitchen, and I have become a huge believer and booster of Factor. Factor's delicious, ready-to-eat meals make eating a joy. It's so fast, you just pop that thing 2 minutes later, and you are eating a restaurant-quality, healthy meal, making you feel excellent about yourself. My favorite is the turkey chili with zucchini, and there is so much more to choose from. You never get tired of it. It fits any budget. It's fast, healthy. It is going to be the new Factor in your life. Yes, I'm a fan. Head to factormeals.com/yang50 and use code yang50 to get 50% off your first box and 2 free wellness shots per box while subscription is active. That's code yang50 at factormeals.com/yang50 to get 50% off your first box. Get Factor today. It's going to change the way you eat. Well, you became this early pioneer in independent politics. You became the chair of what became Fair Vote. I'm on the board of Fair Vote today, by the way. So your legacy continues on. You wrote a book about independent politics, which is awesome. And you became active in Washington State, where you live, before joining Forward. So there's a stretch of a considerable number of years in there, obviously, because we're talking about, gosh, like maybe 20 years or so. But you are one of the OGs of independent politics.
Well, that's kind of, I came out of the independent music world, and it's kind of you to say that. I always think of John B. Anderson as being the OG indie guy, which makes sense. So, and I got to work with John, and that was a real privilege. And I learned a lot from him and just his style and that generation of person. So, I did partisan politics from like 2005 to 2004 to about 2009. And eventually for about 3 years or so, I was chair of the Waukegan County Democratic Central Committee. I was a state committee officer. I was an elected PCO. I still have an image. I took a image of the ballot I was on to be a precinct committee officer. I ran uncontested.
And then you became an independent in 2010 and have been ever since.
Yes, I became an independent, and I do like split ticket. I'll just vote for the person more than the party. We had some really good Democrats here in Southwest Washington in the 19th district, and this was a Democratic district since like the 30s. But in 2016, things changed, and there was this like conservative populism. It changed the political landscape in the state and in rural places, and then we don't have rural Democrats anymore. Not in Southwest Washington where we used to. So you had these people that were they were moderate, and we don't have, on the other side, we don't have suburban Republicans anymore either. So that was like, things are just so not only politically polarized, they're geographically polarized. And you know what I do now is I vote, and I'll just skip so many races, and I don't vote for anybody. And then I'll go down, like for the federal elections, last federal election, I didn't vote for anybody because of our voting system. I didn't vote for anybody in the legislature, and I voted for like county commissioner. I voted for the prosecutor office. I voted. There were some other like local election offices I voted for, but I just didn't feel inspired. Like, well, a lot of it's like resentment of our voting system, which I should. There's good parts about it in Washington State. We have like a runoff system, and so and then in the general election, you just get like two choices.
So I'm going to share with you something that I haven't shared at all, Chris. But the last time I voted, there was absolutely no utility to my voting in, like you said, 95% of the races. It was uncontested. It was just like it was predetermined. I was almost there. Like I felt like I was somehow confirming something I didn't want to confirm by even like filling out the ballot, because the winner was very, very clear in virtually all of them. So I completely can relate. And you've been trying to create real choice for people by having ranked choice voting and more open systems for years. And so when you go in there now, like you almost know too much. At least that's the way
I've learned a
feel.
lot. I was with Fair Vote, which is a really policy oriented group. It's just and this stuff is like when you talk to people about it, you can get that 1,000-yard stare. It's really deep policy. So there's something about having a message that people can respond to instead of just, I guess I could be self-indulgent where I can just get into this stuff, but it won't do a lot of people very good, or I'll assume that people know a lot of these things, but they don't really. And it's not that I'm smarter than anybody else. It's just that I put in the time and just read the paper, read the history. Ranked choice voting's been in the United States for over 100 years. And it was a progressive reform in the early 20th century, and it really caught hold in like Ohio, Massachusetts, and New York. And those are big places for proportion. It was proportional representation version of ranked choice voting, and it really did a good job for what the proponents wanted to do. And the reason why it didn't survive was it was constantly attacked by the insiders.
The insiders hate it, man, because it creates real choice.
Insiders hate it.
It makes it so our votes actually matter. It's like, can't have that. We might decide something that they don't want.
And then now it's coming back because there needs to be a new era in American politics, and it just boils down to the voting system. And people are sophisticated now, where we're well into the communication revolution. And I used to make this joke about people who didn't like VCR, who didn't like ranked choice voting, that their VCR would be flashing 12. You go to people's houses, like they didn't know how to set the clock on the VCR. But it's like, well, I'm dating myself, right? I'm dated, but it's really easy. You just fill out your candidates and you rank them in your order of preference. And then people will criticize ranked choice voting that the counting is complicated, but it's not. And then they'll never defend on, say, when you have proportional ranked choice voting and you have to explain it, I'll say, well, why don't you explain to me how do you make a single member district, and how do you gerrymander? How does, everybody hates gerrymandering, but that's the scope of that political science is deep, and the criteria, there's these just obscure jargon, palsy popper. Like, what's palsy popper? It's this application of rules and data and numbers to geography, and it's really intense. So actually, proportional ranked choice voting is more simple than gerrymandering, and it's more simple for people to understand. It is, yeah, because you
like
can explain it. It's just like you just
depriving
need,
us of our ability to control our future is actually kind of complicated.
yeah, it
The way
is,
they do
yeah,
it,
and
yeah.
then you have when you count it, you can it's all transparent. They were doing ranked choice voting, proportional ranked choice voting in the late 19th century. They were doing hand ballots. It was all transparent, and it's not as complicated as people paint it to be. So I don't buy that argument.
This podcast is sponsored by Helix Sleep. I've always been a mattress guy in that I knew if you're going to spend 8 hours doing something, you should probably invest in doing it right. That's why I love Helix Sleep, which will send a mattress to your door that's made just for you. You take the Helix Sleep quiz and you get matched with a mattress based upon whether you want it to be soft, medium, firm, how you sleep, other variables, and then voila, it gets sent to your door and you can try it for up to 100 nights and send it back. They have a 10 plus year warranty because they believe in their product so much. I do too. My kids do too. They actually seek out this mattress even though it was designed not for them. That's how good this product is. Helix has been awarded the #1 mattress picked by GQ and Wired magazine. It is even recommended by multiple chiropractors and doctors because they think it'll make you healthier. Don't take my word for it. Helix is offering 20% off all mattress orders and 2 free pillows for our listeners. Go to helixsleep.com/yang and use code HelixPartner20. This is their best offer yet, and it won't last long. With Helix, better sleep starts now. My holy grail is proportional representation via something like the Fair Representation Act, which was proposed in Congress. I think it has 5 or 6 proponents at this point. You're actively trying to fight the gerrymandering in Washington state. You and I connected last year. I'm so thrilled that you decided to join Forward, and even more thrilled that you raised your hand and ran for chairperson of the Forward Party of Washington. We had a BAFO event in Seattle a number of months ago where the energy was amazing. The people were great. There are a lot of fired up folks in Washington state. What would you like to see happen in Washington state upcoming? Because you are a pillar of local politics. We met with several candidates when we were there, and folks are fed up. Like, people want something different.
Yeah, we're building a new path in Washington politics. And so what I did is I've always been interested in the potential for social networking and the information revolution. So we downloaded this open source software called HumHub, and it looks like Facebook and it acts like Facebook, but it's not. And we uploaded this application to our own server, or we rent space on a server. So we're completely independent. And so the interface, people are familiar with that kind of social media interface. So when you go to wa.forwardparty.org, and it'll send you it'll say join the hub, and then there is the user agreement for joining this hub. And I wrote it, and it's basically, before you join, you agree, you say, I declare I'm a member of the Washington Forward Party and not a member of another party. I will abide by the bylaws of the Washington Forward Party and bylaws of the National Forward Party. I'm a registered voter in the state of Washington. And you click agree, and you're in. You're a member of the party. And we've got about almost 90 people now on this site. And as far as I know, we're the only party in the world, Washington Forward, that's doing this merging of social networking and political association. And so I joke, I say, well, if you want to waste time online, waste your time on Washington Forward, where you could be. And so it's empowering. So we don't. What's the difference between Washington Forward social media and your run of the mill social media? Well, we don't track you.
It's
We don't
it's
plan.
just independent. It's on
It's
your own
independent.
server.
It's totally independent. It's on our own server. We don't sell you to advertisers.
Yep.
We empower. It's empowering people. And so it's just like as much energy as an individual wants to put into it, you're putting it into the party. So we have that component of that's how we associate. But in September, we had our chartering convention, and we ratified our bylaws, and that's where I was elected chair.
Incredible.
And we elected other officers, and there's our structure of our state party. There's the rules and the bylaws of the party. And one thing that we put in there, and because I read bylaws from different parties around the world, English speaking parties, or there might have been an English version of some bylaws of this other countries, but there's a section in the bylaws about legislative caucus, legislative party. And so the legislative party, they will elect a leader among themselves however they want. It's got to be a majority vote. And also the legislative caucus shall not use the whip system. And I caught this, that's where I caught from these other parties. But so let's think about that. What does that mean? They shall not use the whip system. So what we're doing in Washington Forward is we're debating now, like we're going to have about 4 or 5 things that we're going to have for policy. And out front is like election reform, right?
Yeah, amen to that.
Those kind of things. And then there's some things we're not going to touch, a lot of things we're not going to touch, but there's going to be like these core things. And then everything else, it's up to the legislator. So if you get elected as a forward Washington Forward legislator, then you're expected to, as part of your caucus, is like, yeah, these are the things we're going to do. But everything else, you're an independent. And so it's basically, then you need, if you're a good representative, a good lawmaker, I'll dare say politician, then you're going to listen to your constituents.
Sure.
Say, well, this is what works in my district.
Yep.
We'll have a rural forward person, and then we have a urban forward person, and they agree on those
the fundamentals
things. But everything else, it's just like they're independent. And so then there can be a coalition agreement. So the forward people they're going to have to join a caucus, and there should be some kind of agreement. And especially if the forward people make or break a majority, I'll just say make a majority.
Yes.
Okay. I'll say that. I rephrase that. All right. So they make a majority, and then there should be some concessions from the partner.
The way it ought to work. That's right, Krist. Democracy, the way it ought to work.
The way it ought to work. Now, there was a model for this in the United Kingdom in like 2010 when liberal Democrats and conservatives had a coalition, and they had things like the environmental minister. He was kind of a greenie. He wasn't a Green Party guy, but he had environmental sensibilities more than what the conservative would have done. So they the coalition drug the conservatives over to the center, really, of like environmental things. So that's like, those are the things. But then again, like to just have rigid party discipline and to be a state party, I don't know if that works anymore. I remember when Frank Chop, he was a Democratic Speaker of the House in Washington State, and he's still a state representative in Seattle's 43rd district. He's Croatian, so he and I have this bond, like we're these Croatian guys. And he would do things like with the rural Democrats, and he knew that he would give them a pass on taking these votes.
This podcast is sponsored by ExpressVPN. Why let big tech companies see everything you're doing online when you can just use ExpressVPN, and then be footloose and fancy free. Plus, you get access to exclusive content by beaming in to another market. What do I mean? Let's say you have Netflix and you missed the show Snowpiercer. By the way, I loved that movie. And you want to watch the TV series, not available in the US on Netflix, but if you beam into the UK or someplace else, then there's Snowpiercer on your Netflix. See how it works? This is a way you can get more from what you're already spending on streamers, plus totally anonymous online, plus you can do it by pushing one button anywhere you are. It's why I love ExpressVPN. It's like a set it and forget it. So be smart. Stop paying full price for streaming services and only getting access to a fraction of their content. Get your money's worth at expressvpn.com/yang. Don't forget to use my link at expressvpn.com/yang to get an extra 3 months of ExpressVPN for free. It's why your approach saying, look, like you can vote as an independent on these range of issues, like it is a smart thing, because if you force folks in different areas into a box, like it just doesn't fit. And rural Democrats, we all know, Krist, is something of an oxymoron in American life nowadays. In part of because of what you're describing, it's like you have this orthodoxy that isn't a fit for them, and so then they're just like, oh shoot. By the way, I was just with Lisa Boscola, who represents a rural district in Pennsylvania, who's a Democrat, but now she's affiliated with the Forward Party in part because of what you just said. It's like, look, like the state party beats her up for various votes, and she says, like, this is the district I represent.
Yeah, it's like,
what is going on?
They don't. Yeah, it's just like you got to get some latitude, and a lot of that just beating up people. That's just like the new sensibility. Like, it's rude. You got to give people space, and now it's like you're expected to line up in one column or the other.
There's like this ideological orthodoxy that
it's orthodoxy. It brings me back to like when I was starting out in music, and like I didn't really buy into the like what was supposed to be mainstream music and what was offered to me.
I love that parallel so much, Krist. There's like the mainstream, and then there's the independent energy of the people, and you made history with Nirvana, and we're going to do the same thing with Forward. It has been so much fun working with you this last number of months. The fact that you're a licensed pilot, you literally just hop in your plane and fly wherever
is weather permitting.
Weather permitting, I didn't fly today. Very safe and responsible.
Big storms, yeah.
Yes, you and I have traveled some for Forward. We've had some adventures together. We're working with people like Governor Christy Todd Whitman and Lieutenant Governor Kerry Healy and a bunch of other awesome people around the country. What's your favorite memory of our Forward exploits over the last number of months? I'm going to say LA and the American Democracy Summit. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, American Democracy Summit. That was a good one, and that was an event in Los Angeles, where I was chair of Fair Vote until 2019, and then there was the pandemic and all that stuff. So I hadn't really been plugged into politics. I took a few years off, and so to come back and to see the progression of ranked choice voting and proportional representation and just the support for it. Like I remember in 1997, like we're and here's Krist from the moon, like, or Mars. Like, what are you talking about? What is this stuff? And now it's just really, it's become established, and it's growing. And then to be part of a political association and part of the Forward Party that's something that is I've been wanting to do for a long time, is to rekindle political association, and we need to do more of that in the United States. There's the Putnam study, Bowling Alone, I think 1999, and there's a revised.
Dude, it's much worse today too. I mean, his stuff was right like 24 years ago, but he updated and was like, "Hey, it's worse now."
It's worse now, so people don't associate like that. And then just the power of the collective voice, people with shared needs and values coming together and expressing themselves. It's a First Amendment issue, really. It's protected by the First Amendment. if we had more political association and more parties, and not necessarily like partisanship, but if you just have this clear parties or just like, well, this is what this party's advocating, and it's easier for voters to digest the issues. Like there used to be ballots where there was like that showed the Democratic Party, and it was like FDR would be the Democratic Party, and there was a like a sketch of him, and then there was a sketch of Abraham Lincoln because he was the Republican Party, right? And so policies just get, there's the legislators are these generalists, and they cover so many things, and I can't even follow it all. But what parties do is they distill the issues for people. And so you can say, well, I'm a Green Party person. I'm a Forward Party person. Because that's what parties need to do. So that's what we're doing in Washington with Forward Party. We're organizing. We've passed our charter. We've got our officers. And now we're getting ready for the 2024 election. We're a Democratic, small D Democratic group. So we need to get the members we need to hash this stuff out. What policies are we going to promote and offer to voters, and what kind of candidates? So basically it's something you can advocate 4 or 5 things, and then it's up to the candidates themselves and their districts and how they campaign and what are their resumes and what are they going to do. It's a lot of work.
Well, it's a beautiful formula, and I love what you said about just having more association, more community, more things for people to actually engage in to make their communities a better place. I mean, that is the dream. I got to say, hanging out with you at that Seattle event makes my top 10 list of forward memories from the past number of months. Working with you has been a blast and will continue to be a blast. How can people keep up with you, Krist? I will shout out your band Third Secret, which is on my playlist. I find the music very, very inspiring, honestly. And it brings me, it's like, it has a little bit of that Seattle grunge feel. So like, I feel a little bit of like kind of hearkening to an earlier time, but it's also very current. So shout out to Third Secret. But how can people keep up with you, your work, your music, if they want to do so?
There's a couple things. I have my own website, deepriverdispatch.com, that I do myself. Again, I found a place on a rent space on a server. I even code it myself. I have basic coding skills. So you can find out about Third Secret, 3RD Secret. That's our band. There's a website, 3rdsecret.com. You can go to wa.forwardparty.com.
Yes.
And then there's the Summit, which is the party press for Washington Forward. And I've got about 4 articles on there right now, just op-ed.
And if you are in a state that is not Washington State, go to forwardparty.com and click on your state. You will get hooked up with leaders who may not be literal rock stars like Krist, but they will be democracy rock stars. And just by joining Forward, there's a little bit of rock star in you. There's a bit of the independent spirit, which is what the country needs. Pumped, Krist, for having you. And go to Forward Party to see who's leading forward in your area.
Thanks, Andrew.
I'm going to hop in that plane at some point.